Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Penguin Teen Presents Carving Out Space. 6 YA female authors discuss their craft panel. My name is Tamara Fuentes, and I'm the entertainment editor over at 17. And one of my favorite things that I get to cover is books. So this is so awesome. Thank you to San Diego Comic-Con also for hosting this panel and for Penguin Teen for asking me to come and moderate it. I am so very honored and so excited to welcome our guests. Ayanna Gray is the author of speculative works and lover of all things monsters and mythos and hashtag melanin magic. Originally from Atlanta, she now lives in sunny Florida, where she reads avidly, follows Formula One racing, and worries over her adopted Black baby rhino Apollo. Visa Prey is her debut novel. Welcome, Ayanna. Renee Ahdieh is a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She's passionate about all things curry, rescue dogs, and college basketball. She lives in Charlotte, North Carolina with her husband and their tiny overlord of a dog. She is the author of the #1 New York Times bestselling The Wrath and the Dawn and its sequel, The Rose and the Dagger. Welcome, Renee. Ginny Myers Sain lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and has spent the past 20 years working closely with teens pursuing careers in theater. Having grown up in deeply rural America, she's interested in telling stories about resilient kids who come of age in remote settings. Dark and Shallow Lies is her debut novel. Welcome, Ginny. Jessica Goodman is the op-ed editor at Cosmo and the author of They Wish They Were Us. They'll Never Catch Us is her second novel. Welcome, Jessica. Stephanie Perkins is the New York Times bestselling author and anthology editor of multiple books. She's always worked with books, first as a bookseller, then as a librarian, and now as a novelist. Stephanie lives in the mountains of North Carolina with her husband, and every room of their house is painted a different color of the rainbow. I wish I could see that. Welcome, Stephanie. And New York Times bestselling author Krystal Sutherland's first novel, Our Chemical Hearts, was published in over 20 countries and adapted into a movie starring Lily Reinhart and Austin Abrams. Sutherland served as the executive producer on the project. Originally from Australia, she has lived on 4 continents and currently calls London home. House Apollo is her latest novel. Welcome, Krystal. So I think particularly in the YA genre with female authors, I feel like there's still a little comprehension of like either picking up a female YA author's book, or sometimes even seeing them getting picked up in terms of, offers and things like that. So I want to start, kind of where we start. So with Ayanna, I want to start with you. How do you feel like, especially for female writers, YA has changed, since you've, kind of grown up with it and now being as an author in it? Through your own experiences.
Yeah, sure. I think I was lucky in that I grew up and was a teenager during this time of there was a really big YA boom. And so there were so many books that were targeted and really created for my reading group, which was really special. I've really enjoyed as both a reader and then as an aspiring writer, and now as an author, getting to watch YA expand what it explores and the narratives that we're telling. I think there was a kind of standard archetype of a heroine who is strong and doesn't like dresses necessarily, and those heroines are okay, these strong women. But I think it's been cool to watch that expanded and like I said, get to tell stories from other perspectives and show different kinds of strength and different kinds of family and love and trial and error and imperfect people. So I've enjoyed that.
Renee, what about you?
So I said something really, really smart, but y'all just didn't hear it because I was muted the whole time. So anyway, hi, Tamara. Thanks so much. I really love this question. I think it's an interesting one because for so long, I feel like people who identify as women in the writer industry in YA have dominated the field. And it hasn't necessarily been as evident if you look at things like awards or even bestsellers over the course of, writing. And I obviously attribute a lot of that to firstly white supremacy and secondly to the patriarchy. I think that unfortunately as well, a lot of young adult writers tend to write things about romance, which also sort of like it's stigmatized a little bit as being something that young women enjoy. And what I've really enjoyed and like what I've really loved about being a young adult writer is sort of upending a lot of these stigmas and sort of like bringing attention to the fact that just because young women or women love something doesn't mean it needs to be sort of treated as something to be backburnered or silly, or there's a sense of infantilization a little bit about it. And I've really, really loved working in this industry, especially over the past couple of years, to be part of these very meaningful dialogues that are changing and hopefully upending the system that has perpetuated both the patriarchy and white supremacy for so long. And seeing a lot of books, like I'm so excited about Ayanna's book. There are so many terrific writers out there who are bringing stories that we didn't have as children available to us readily in the Western world, and they're bringing them to life, and I'm here for it.
Ginny, moving on to you, anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I think that all of that is certainly something that's been exciting to watch over the last couple of years. I think the biggest change to me has been sort of the perception of what YA could be, and what it was maybe historically, or what people thought it was, and sort of this new, broader, deeper definition of this kind of stories we can tell, and the way we can tell those stories, and most importantly, who gets to tell those stories. And I think that's been really exciting to see happen.
Jessica, what about you?
Yeah, I'd love to echo what's already been said. I think that women are some of the strongest and most creative folks out there, right? And what is coming out that is exciting to me is often written by people who identify as women. And I think that's because for so long we did not see ourselves in a lot of these stories. And so much of what authors are saying right now when they're coming out with these books are, I'm writing the story that I wanted to read as a kid, or I'm writing the story that I wish I had as a kid. And to see those stories come to life, I think is so exciting, and something that hopefully future generations can look at and say, I can be in this field, I can be in this world in a way that maybe previous generations hadn't.
Stephanie, what about you?
Yeah, I just want to, on top of all of that, give a shout out to Essie Hinton, who her book, The Outsiders, is considered the first YA book. So this really is a genre that women invented. And also Judy Bloom, who a couple weeks ago just got her doctorate, an honorary doctorate from Yale. And she pointed out, it was on Instagram or Facebook or something, that when she was in college, women weren't even allowed to attend Yale. So we've come a long way, and there's a long way to keep going, but that gave me hope. It was an exciting news story to see.
And Krystal, what about you?
Lucky last. I will echo what everybody else said, but yeah, I think young adult, especially at the moment, is this really innovative and exciting space. And we're seeing people who are playing with form and playing with character, and playing especially with the idea of a strong female character and what that can be. I remember growing up, it was, Katniss Everdeen was your strong female character, and she certainly is. But I think we've seen that change over the past kind of 5 to 10 years, where it doesn't necessarily just mean physically strong, but there are all of these interesting and dynamic ways that we're seeing women's stories being told. And I think YA does a really great job of pushing the boundaries of what is possible.
Krystal, that is such a great segue to my next question, which is, kind of the evolution of the strong female character. I think a lot of, especially for us, growing up in the YA genre, as some of you had mentioned, the characters that were created by Judy Bloom, or characters like Katniss Everdeen, were always viewed as the strong female character. And they kind of fit almost somewhat the same archetype of a girl who is very loud and almost opinionated and unafraid to kind of, beat the system in any way, shape, or form that is necessary in this world. So I kind of I'm going to start backwards. So Krystal, I'm going to start over with you. What do you feel like the definition of a strong female character is right now in this day and age?
So when I was growing up, it was really about these kind of physically strong women who were, like Buffy or Katniss, who had these amazing skills in archery or, martial arts. And I really aspired to be like that when I was growing up. Like, we all aspired to be the superhero and to be physically strong, because I'm thinking of Naomi Alderman's book, The Power, at the moment, where women become physically strong and the power dynamic kind of flips. And I think that's the appeal of a physically strong female character. But then as I kind of got older, And I tried laser tag for the first time, and I realized that I would quickly die in a zombie apocalypse and would die in the Hunger Games also. I became much more interested in portraying female strength in different ways. So I'm very conscious of not writing female characters who are just like amazing at some kind of physicality, but are what I would call strong in other ways. Like they are strong of opinion, or strong in intelligence, or strong in whatever else, but just making them a bit more dynamic, I think, and less focus on the physicality. That's what I attempt to do in my work.
Stephanie, what about you?
Yeah, in general, strong female character is not a phrase that I love, because traditionally it was so associated with physical strength. So this is a tough one, right? For me, it's just kind of wanting to eliminate the word strong and just like, let's just have some diverse, interesting, fully rounded human female characters, rather than just having them be the sidekick in adventures. Or I don't know. I think a strong female character is just any female character who's well written.
Jessica, moving on to you.
Yeah, I think for me, when I'm writing the girls in my books, I always think about the term like unlikable, because obviously that word is like, it's so frustrating to hear that someone in your book is unlikable, because that, to me, that just means that they're real. They're a real person who has flaws, and that means that you probably did a good job in writing them, because all people are 3D and have flaws, and those are the kinds of characters that I like to write and that I like to read. So I think for me, like the word strong, which I also have some mixed feelings about, I think to me it just means that they are someone who's real, and that we have like all been given permission, I think, as readers and writers, to, you know, enjoy stories about these people and dive into these worlds where, you know, things don't always end super neatly with a wrapped up bow, you know, and we can kind of let these characters fly and do bad things and make mistakes and get messy, and like that to me is the most interesting part about writing young women.
Ginny, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I think for me, that word strong, of course, you know, does have those mixed connotations that everyone has mentioned. I think a lot of times we think of strong female characters as characters that are that just forth bravely into the world and do what they're supposed to do. And I think, like most of us as women, know that real strength comes from being afraid, from not knowing what's going to happen, and not knowing if you're making the right choices, and not knowing how everything is going to end up, but still being, you know, finding that inner strength to go on and do and move forward. And for me, I find it much more interesting to read about women who struggle with finding that strength within themselves, but who are able to scrape it up from somewhere and find the courage to go on, than necessarily that sort of idea of the stereotypical strong woman who doesn't struggle, who is obviously starts out being brave and ready and unafraid. And so I think it's just a more layered dynamic, a more layered character.
Renee?
I really love that both Stephanie and Jessica mentioned their struggle with the idea of a strong female character, because I've always really sort of like internally cringed whenever people talk about strong female characters around me, because again, so much of the idea of strength is through the lens of masculinity. We're saying that these characters are good fighters, they're good hunters, they're good providers. They tend to have a stoic personality or very loud and boisterous, these things that you associate with men. And it's been something that from the very beginning of my writing career, I have wanted to upend. And I do feel like we're moving, even with this discussion and this dialogue, towards a place where we no longer have to qualify a female character as strong in order to make her acceptable or likable to our readers and audiences. I would much rather focus on the things like with my 3 main characters from the 3 series that I've written so far. Shahrazad from The Wrath and the Dawn, she's an amazing storyteller. And I hope when people read my books, that's what they walk away. Shahrazad is an amazing storyteller who happens to be a really fierce friend and all these other things. I hope that they're not just using the word strong, which to me is what I would say is like, it's weak. That's a weak adjective to use. There's so many more dynamic, wonderful ways to describe women. In my second series, Mariko from Flame in the Mist, she's an inventor. She is a scientist. And I hope that's what people walk away from, that she's innovative and she does all these really cool things that all these men around her couldn't even fathom. And then in the beautiful Celine, she's somebody who her character and her sense of self is so real and defined and yet flawed and raw. And these are the things I hope people walk away with after reading my books. I really hope you don't walk away saying like, Renee writes good, strong female characters. My soul will cringe. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Ayana, what about you?
This is so interesting. And then, for me, I have another layer of that kind of sticks with me in that for Black women, there is a whole different set of expectations and stereotypes that go along with the strong Black woman. And I'm a Black woman who writes stories about Black people. So when I'm thinking about a strong female character, there's a whole another layer there that I think about. And it's a crazy story about 2 kids who go into a jungle. So some prowess and strength is sort of necessary. And that's something that I struggled with and wanted to be really thoughtful about. For me, I don't, and this is the thing, I think that what's happened, this strong woman, it's an overcorrection. We look at the way that women were portrayed in, say, the 50s, they were at home cooking barefoot, not doing anything else, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's the only way that women were portrayed. So then there was this weird overcorrection where now women can't be into any of those things. They have to be, aligned with these masculine traits to be respected and to be strong. So I'm hoping that, okay, we've gone in both extremes, now we can find maybe a middle. Because I think it's okay for there to be female characters who, prefer not to wear a dress and prefer to wear shorts and prefer to fight. And they are tough, but they also have vulnerability. So I think it's about showing layers. They're allowed to be physically strong, but they can also be emotionally strong, carrying, trauma, carrying different emotional tolls and continuing to live life despite those challenges. That's a kind of strength. And I love seeing books where a character perseveres and shows internal strength despite the challenges they're facing. I still want to see those things too. So it's been said by everyone here. I think it's just about digging and finding layers instead of settling for just strong women.
I think it's interesting that you also mentioned that it's kind of like almost the opposite of what women have grown up to, look up to be almost in a way, in the past. And now, through the creation of strong female characters, the masculinity of it all. And also now, as you're creating these things, it's almost like they have to, especially when you're growing up and you're looking at these characters, subject to yourself to the perfection of who they are. And that's just not how reality and life really is, as in real life. So, I don't know who wants to jump in on this question next, but do you feel as an author, it's kind of like, especially in this generation of authors and all the stories that you all have been telling, do you feel like you're almost correcting the wrongs of like the striving of who this, person that you have to strive to be because you love them in the books, and kind of changing that narrative in a way with the different kinds of characters that you're developing and writing?
I don't know who said this, but I remember hearing someone say that the act of writing alone is a political act. And I always say this to people who are endeavoring any sort of artistic, they're trying to have some sort of artistic endeavor, whether it be painting, writing, sculpture, whatever you do, your worldview seeps its way into it. And I think that with writing as a woman, writing female characters, invariably you are making a statement. And I'm hoping that statement, and I feel this way very strongly about the women I'm speaking with on this panel here, we're trying to shift that narrative. We're very carefully trying to shift that narrative. And whether it's intentional or unintentional, to me, doesn't really matter, because our perspectives, our worldviews, our experiences, they are coloring every aspect of the writing that we put out there. And hopefully when it's well accepted and people fall in love with it, it's helping to shape their future worldview too as well.
And I'll just add that as someone who's been writing a little longer than some of the authors here, I'm now writing to correct some of my own things. You know, I've changed a lot over the years, and it's been fascinating seeing the interpretations of readers and realizing like, oh, I didn't even know that that was in there. And working on myself. And I feel like I'm in a constant dialogue because writing is such a solitary act. Like you have to search for those things, but it's also like, I got to work on me too all the time.
Anyone else would like to add anything for that question? I think it's interesting, Stephanie, that you had mentioned that writing is such a solitary act, because I feel like, especially over the recent years with the creation of Twitter and Goodreads and, you know, fandom and Tumblr, things like that, I feel like writing in particular has become not necessarily solitary, but a very much a communal thing. And I feel like we see that, you know, as you are all talking about each other and each other's work and being fans of that stuff, you know, kind of the community that has been able to be created through social media, and especially for women in writing, has been, I think, so impressive and so monumental to see. Who is there anybody who would like to talk a little bit about the community that has been able to be made through these advances, and how that has helped you as a writer kind of, you know, hone your craft, and also, you know, giving to other writers and hearing their advices on your own writing, and growing in that aspect, not just as a person, but as a writer yourself and what you're doing?
Krystal, do you want to go ahead?
You go first.
It's funny, I can like kind of point to Krystal because she's an example of someone who I met because of the online author community, and I'm really grateful. And in fact, several people in the panel I've gotten to kind of meet through social media, and so I'm really grateful. I tell everybody, aspiring writers who are looking to go the traditional publication route, finding a community is half the battle, because it's such a fraught process. Even when your process is good, even when it's relatively smooth, there's nothing like being a debut and figuring out all of the gosh, I'm still going through it. So figuring out all of the things to do, the things not to do. Is this normal? Is it not normal? Am I losing it? Is this just complete? Is this my schedule breakdown? I relied on not just the Twitter community or the Instagram communities, but even niches within those. So again, speaking to being a Black woman, I've been able to find other Black female identifying authors who have shared my very specific experience. And growing up, I didn't have any Black friends who wrote fantasy, so I just thought I was a weirdo. There were absolutely Black fantasy authors out there, I just didn't know any. And so to find other authors who were interested in the things that I was interested in, and were saying, you can do this, I'm doing this too, was really encouraging, really inspiring. And writing is solitary. No matter how many friends you have or followers you have, at the end of the day, it's just you, unless you're co-writing, it's just you at your computer writing. So having people to check in with, having people who are both ahead of me, behind me in the process, alongside me in the process, has been truly a godsend, and I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, similarly for me, I back before I was published, when I was just an aspiring writer, I found a group on Twitter who were in a very similar position to me, where we were, you know, drafting things and just kind of quietly working on things, a bit too embarrassed to tell people that we were writers, because we didn't feel like we were worthy of that title, because we hadn't had anything published yet. And we really we built each other up, and we're like, yes, we are writers. We're going to be writers. We're going to do this. And this amazing thing has happened with these people that I met 8 years ago on Twitter, in that we all went through this process together, and we got agents around the same time, and we got book deals around the same time. And we've been able to support each other in this industry for almost a decade now, which is incredible. And I think that's like the most valuable community that I have had as an author, is just this kind of connection that I made really early on in my career with people that I met haphazardly online, and they have been the ones who have really kind of been with me through the whole thing. So my advice to aspiring writers would be, find people who are at a similar stage to you, who will read your work and whose work you can read, and who can be there with you on that journey as you progress through your career.
I'd just like to jump in and say that like I have always really looked up to the people who have found their writer community on social media. Like I have definitely met some amazing authors, some who are on this panel today through social media, but I find Instagram and Twitter that can be so demoralizing to my own like confidence sometimes. And so I think that something that I've really had to learn and take to heart, especially around my debut year when They Wish They Were Us came out last year, I really had to take stock of my own self-esteem and my own self-worth and how social media was making me feel like when I was looking at, who was commenting on whose Instagram, which is like so silly, but those are the kinds of things that I think you can really obsess over and that can really break you down. And something I've really learned over the past year is like when I should take a step back, when I should listen to myself and say, you know what, you need an Instagram break, you need a Twitter break. Like it all that stuff is just, it can be really helpful, but it can also be harmful. And so I just want to like have that voice in there too, that like it's okay if like sometimes that isn't the place for you. And that if those spaces can make you feel like insecure, it's okay to just kind of like close your app and like maybe play a crossword puzzle instead.
Would anyone else like to add anything for that question? I think it's also pretty fascinating, kind of like the aspect of, how generations have changed over the particular years and kind of their expectations for why in particular have changed over the years, looking towards, who you're specifically writing for, which in this case would be Gen Z. Has there something that, particularly for you felt like has changed for the YA genre in particular, and especially writing towards a female audience, that was surprising to you as a writer, right now creating work?
It's so funny. Like, so before I was a published author, I was a huge fan of Stephanie's work. And I even remember at one point, like I had a work thing going on and I actually sent my husband to one of her book signings in the city that I lived in to get my book signed that I had, like Anna and the French Kiss, that whole, like the first 3 books. And I had them like wrapped in a bow to like have her sign them. And it's fascinating and wonderful to me because I feel like right around that time was when the dialogue started to shift. We need diverse books, and that we need to have books about like inclusive, not only worldviews, but perspectives, experiences that didn't just span to like religion or race. It was all across the spectrum. And I love that because I even feel like with Stephanie's books, there's that entree into there, whether she did that intentionally or unintentionally. There's that entree into deepening and broadening your worldview, not just have something in like going on in your backyard, or like an experience that only like an American white audience would understand and appreciate. And I think that has been something that I've really loved to see across my experience, because I sold my book in 2013. It was published in 2015. So just sort of seeing the shift and the dialogue changing, and also with that Gen Z's perspective changing, their expectations of what they want in literature. They don't want people who are just like, even for me, like I was very tentative in the waters with The Wrath and the Dawn. I was very aware of like, is this going to be a book that's going to be widely accepted by a Western white audience? My mom, she's South Korean. She had been telling me for years to stop writing about non-white characters. That's why I was never getting published. She was like, oh, you're gonna, and then I told her I was going to write something inspired by the Arabian Nights. She's like, with white kids? And I was like, no. And she's like, she told me in Korean, good luck, stupid. And I just like, she said, it's okay. My mom is a fantastic human and I love it so much, but that it's Taraba Pabo. She was just essentially saying like, you're never going to get anywhere if you keep doing this. They're never going to accept your books. And it's been very gratifying to see that that's not the case.
I just want to say thank you, Renee. I did not know that, and that made me feel really good. And I forgot what we were talking about because I was just glowing. So thank you. And I'm just going to throw out a really strange and practical thing just because it was the first thing that popped into my mind. And I'm someone who's at the tail end of Generation X. So like, I'm not even the millennial. And I have got to say, like, the way I am feeling a greater distance from my audience these days, because the way that technology has influenced their life is so vastly different from how it's affected mine. And I write contemporary stories, even, you know, from my romance to my horror, they're both set in contemporary settings. And it's been a really big challenge for me in the last few years, because suddenly now I'm talking to a generation that has never not had it fully integrated into their life. And it is an interesting thing where I see a lot of authors who are around my age, who have been writing for teens for years, who are now starting to write for adults, or who are writing middle grade. And I find myself in those territories as well. And you know, there's this thing, I just always want to be writing the most honest book possible. And I love this audience so much. And I do think personally in the future, like if I want to keep writing for teenagers, that I might even have to shift and work in something that's a little more fantastical, just because that's this aspect of their life that's so crucial and important. And like, I aged out of it, and it's kind of it is a bummer for me. I feel really sad to have lost that.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned, you know, kind of the evolution of technology and everything like that, because I also think in a way it kind of opened the doors for a lot of authors who otherwise wouldn't have been able to get published, to kind of get not only the information that they needed to be able to get published, but also kind of knowing sort of the secrets, or like the use of different things that people have used over the years that, you know, other people might not have known, that can help them, you know, create a book, whether it's, you know, going the self-publishing route, or, you know, trying to figure out how to write a query letter and everything like that. Like Google has answers for you in so many different ways. Is there something in particular that has surprised you, you know, from when you started to now, that you think would be interesting for people who are watching this, who are interested in finding out, that they can easily maybe find thanks to like technology and the community that has been created for YA?
I think a cool thing about, you know, and it's a mixed bag, and I'm like looking all over the place. Jessica, I'm really glad that you spoke up about social media and finding boundaries and knowing when to step back, because that's a lesson I had to learn as well. And I, you know, with things, but specifically Twitter, I think I kind of have one foot in, one foot out. I really enjoy aspects of it, but also do step back. But one cool thing about Twitter in general, and specifically in the publishing and writing space, is the direct access that it gives you. I'm a millennial. I grew up in like the 90s, early 2000s. And the idea back then of being able to say something directly, like I remember when my grandmother wrote to Oprah, and she autographed a book and sent it. It was the coolest thing to like know, okay, Oprah Winfrey touched this, and that access is such a cool thing. And now with Twitter, I can tweet at Barack Obama. Like that's really weird and cool that I can just like say something to him, or I don't know, to any celebrity or famous person. He may never see it, but I can like send him a message. And so in book Twitter, I think what's really neat is the access that aspiring writers and authors have to the industry professionals. There are pitching contests where you can put your book out there, and an agent will see it, and they can like it, and they can like comment and request and say, I like this, please send it to me. And there are, you know, events like D.D. Pitt have caused, probably over 100 authors now to launch their careers because of social media, because they've had that access. And this is not even addressing socioeconomic realities. You know, previously you might have had to go to a conference to talk to an agent. You might have had to pay $50 for a sit down, for a 15-minute sit down with an agent who might or might not like your stuff. You had to hope that it was in your town. You had to hope that you could afford to get there. Now with social media, I think we've opened up and let people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, people in different geographic locations have that direct access to professionals. And with the pandemic, which was really, really awful, I think one of the cool silver linings is possibly opening up careers in publishing too, because we know that we also need to see, you know, representation, not just in the authors who are sending the work, but in the people who are receiving it, who are on the other side of that coin. So yeah, I'm a big fan of access, a big fan of opening doors for people and leaving them open so other people can walk in after you. And that's one thing. Social media can be mixed bag, but I'm really grateful that social media has started to open up some of those doors and windows.
I think it's been really, just sort of echoing what Ayana said, it's been really cool over the last like year or so to watch the shift to from like the millennial Instagram, very curated life to the more Gen Z TikTok, spur of the moment. And it's interesting too, because I think TikTok is such a fascinating like social media form and creation, because it is still heavily intentional, heavily curated, but it has this feel of faux authenticity that is really, really appealing. And I know that there are times that some of this is incredibly authentic. And I love the fact that some of it's meant to look unscripted. It's meant to look real and raw and sort of like, I'm going to date myself, but like Blair Witchy at times, you know, like, which is such a complete about face from this incredibly well-crafted, like you have to hire somebody to film it and edit it for you that people were expecting to have on Instagram. And I attribute that a lot to the switch in millennials sort of driving forward the what's considered popular in the zeitgeist, and now it's Gen Z. And I'm sort of I really like that the take is this more authentic, no BS approach to presenting oneself online, because I was afraid, especially for teenagers and especially for teenage girls, because I remember growing up in a time where social media didn't exist as a teenager and still feeling this really like just this chokehold of expectation around how I was supposed to look, how I was supposed to behave, how thin I was supposed to be, what I was supposed to eat, the makeup I was supposed to wear. And I thought it was just so much worse now with social media. Like I could even see with my at that time, they were 12 and 13, our nieces, that just, it was a stranglehold on them, this expectation that Instagram had put forward for what, you know, teenage girls were supposed to look like. And I'm pleasantly, tentatively surprised by what's happening with TikTok.
I'm going to go back to the format that we had before, where I'll call each on you in order, but, you know, because we're about to run out of time. So for my last question, you know, what is the main piece of advice that you would like to give to aspiring female writers who want to get into this industry, either a tip or something that you have learned along the way that you want them to keep in mind as they hopefully, you know, pursue a career in this? So Ayana, I'll start with you.
There's so much. I think the advice that I clung to that meant so much to me while I was writing Beasts of Prey was actually advice that I think came from one of my favorite authors, Summer Tahir. And she said, protect your writing time fiercely, you know, because it's so solitary. You don't feel like it's ever going to manifest when you're all alone at 9 o'clock at night writing. People are asking you to go out, or, you know, it doesn't look like you're working. But I really held on to what she said, protect your time fiercely, believe in yourself, and yeah, I'll leave it there. Just believe in yourself.
Renee?
Write for you first and foremost. Don't write for your editor. Don't write for readers. Don't write for anybody. Write for yourself. Because if you don't love it, you're stuck, because you're going to read it 300 times.
Ginny?
I would say probably don't to show the messy side of it. I think a lot of times we expect women creators in general to create in a neat way, in a aesthetic pleasing way. And I would just say, if you've got dark stories, if you've got weird stories, if you've got unusual stories, if you've got characters that are not neat, that don't fit in those little boxes, afraid to take all that is part of you and put it on the page, whether it ends up being something that is capable of being tied up in a neat little bow or not.
Jessica?
Finish whatever you're working on. Like, just get to the words the end, because it is so much easier to polish and revise something when you actually have like the whole manuscript or short story or script or whatever you're working on. Just get to the end and everything gets easier from there.
Stephanie?
Trying to think of something I haven't said before in one of these. And I just want to say, be kind to yourself. Women tend to be really hard on themselves in general. It's a generalization, but I certainly am. And I had to really be kind to myself in order to continue in this career, because the first few years were pretty tough. And I kind of had to step back from things and make sure I was still doing it for the right reasons, that it was still the job I wanted to do the most. And I just had to relax my own expectations and be nice to me. Yeah.
Krystal?
I think my mantra when I was working on my first kind of unpublished manuscript was, why shouldn't it be me? Like, there will always be another book deal. There will always be another New York Times bestseller. There will always be another like movie adaptation. And it felt like the odds were really stacked against me. And they kind of are stacked against you when you are starting out as an author. But why shouldn't it be you? Why shouldn't your story be the one that gets published? Why shouldn't your book be the one that gets made into a movie? It's going to happen to someone. Like, put yourself in the running, be there, and it may happen to you.
Thank you all so much for your time. I like to end my panels with some rapid fire questions. So I hope you don't mind to stick around a little bit longer to answer some of these. They're fun, although they will put you on the spot. They might start some conversation, so I apologize, but hopefully we just have fun with it. The first one, ebook or hard copies?
Hard copies.
Hard copies.
Books.
Books, and I love that answer. Hardcover or paperback?
Hardcover.
Hardcover.
Paperback.
Series or standalone?
Series.
Standalone.
I'm standalone.
Both.
Standalone.
Heroes or villains?
Villains.
Villains.
Heroes.
Villainous heroes? Heroic villains?
Anti-heroes.
Author who inspired you when you were younger?
Francesca Leah Block.
Megan McCafferty.
Tamara P.S.
I just see Ayana thinking.
Okay, then I'll take better return.
Anybody else? Or did everyone say their answer? I wasn't sure. And then my last question, book that made you fall in love with reading?
Okay, mine.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anne Rice's
No,
Queen
no.
of
Ooh.
Okay.
Mine was Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging.
Mine was the classic Harry Potter.
It's a tie, Harry Potter or the Chronicles of Narnia.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Bring it back to Charlotte's Web.
My first chapter's up.
So good.
I think, was that everyone's answers? I think we got everybody. Yeah. Well, thank y'all so very much. Thank you to Penguin Teen once again for asking me to moderate this panel. Hope you all learned something today as you were watching it, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of your San Diego Comic-Con, even though it is virtual this year, but still, nonetheless, hope you guys enjoy yourselves. Have a great one.